I was able to stack up 32,248 points for damaged ground-based arc enemies during a night raid on Dam Battlegrounds. While I think Spaceport overall is the better map choice based on the volume of heavier arc spawns, Dam Battlegrounds was a decent alternative, and I think you could push this score to 40 to 45k if you get a little bit more lucky with your big arc spawns and raiders participating in some of the eliminations. For my equipment, I brought in a hole cracker with 8 stacks of ammo, an anvil just as backup, 3 deadlines for the bastions I plan to eliminate, a couple of wolf packs for the bombardier, and then some zip lines to help me move around the map just a little bit quicker. Once you spawn in terms of priority for points, you want to focus the bastion and the bombardier, if you can, on spawn. These two give you the highest volume of points for this specific challenge, so you want to get the farm in on those if you can. That said, if you do spawn somewhere like I did in the Red Lakes, which puts you right by a leaper spawn, there is value in grabbing that leaper on the way up to the bombardier. Now in terms of process here, keep in mind that the spawns are a little bit scattered across the map for leaper, bombardier, and bastion. While the other enemies do count, like fireballs, ticks, and pops, as well as the comets, you don't make as much points as you do for the larger arc enemies, and you really won't move the needle a whole lot if you focus on those smaller arc. Leaper will spawn in one of 4 places during a night raid: the testing annex, the Red Lakes, the control tower, research and administration, and the water treatment extraction. The bombardier spawns just outside of the research and administration building, and there's only one that spawns on this map. And then the bastions will spawn in the hydrodomes and the pipeline tower. Now in general, for the big arc, the respawn time is about 7 minutes. But in this match, unfortunately for me, I had a bastion that waited over 20 minutes to respawn. And that was the pipeline tower bastion. Just did not want to come back for me. Now in terms of the rotation and the route here, my recommendation is to focus on the arc enemy that is closest to you when you spawn. Don't waste a bunch of time running across the map to try and farm up an arc that is more points but farther away, because you end up losing time for the rest of the match and you have to double back for the elimination on the arc enemy you're running past anyway. So for me, I decided I was going to grab the leaper and then run up towards the bombardier outside of the control tower. For leaper, just use the hole cracker. You can take leapers down pretty quick as long as you're hitting your shots with it. While in general, the leaper's weak spot is its legs, I highly recommend just hitting center of mass, the eye of the leaper, with the hole cracker. It is a much more accurate and easy shot than it is trying to hit the legs, especially at night, through the smoke of the hole cracker and the smoke of the leaper, and it moving around like it does. Also keep an eye out for comets that roam around the leapers fairly frequently. Once the leaper was eliminated, I headed up towards the bombardier. Now, I know there's a lot of players that like to deadline bombardiers, but I have the most tremendously terrible luck with trying to deadline bombardiers. I don't know what it is, but for whatever reason, when I try and do it, I fail at planting it, or the bombardier just continues to back up, firing its mortar at me and just dropping me instantly. My process for bombardiers is to use a single wolf pack and then finish it up with a hole cracker. The wolf pack does the heavy lifting, and it only takes a few rounds from the hole cracker to finish the job. With the bombardier being eliminated, I wanted to head over to the bastion in the pipeline tower or in the hydrodome. It was just based on where I could hear it or see it on the map. Now, this is where I wanted to use some zip lines, because trying to get across the gap in between the control tower side and the pipeline tower side, it takes a ton of time and it puts you into a pretty risky spot with a lot of arc that are flying overhead. So I used the zip line to drop down on top of the Baron, and then from the Baron more across the field towards the bastion. I tried to place the third zip line up to where the bastion is, but it wouldn't place correctly, so instead I just ran that part of the distance. For the bastion, shoot it with either weapon to aggro it to you. You want to let the bastion start to walk towards you and get as close as possible before you immobilize it. Focus your hole cracker onto a single leg, and after a few shots it will blow up and you'll see the bastion go down and it becomes immobilized for 10 seconds. The moment you see the bastion go down, you need to run out and get on top of it and place your deadline in the center of its head, and then run to get yourself back to safety. You can place it on the side, but in my experience this does not always 100% eliminate it. And placing it on the top center is where the weak spot is once you blow through the armor, and it always one-shots it as long as you paralyze one of the legs first. If you do end up deciding to deadline the side of the bastion, keep in mind that as it's wiggling on the ground, it can become very challenging to get your deadline to stick on it. With bastion moving around as much as it does, it becomes a challenge to get the deadline to stick and your plant can break making it much more dangerous for you to stick around trying to place it again after it's broken your placement once. My recommendation is if you've tried to place it twice and it's failed because Bastion's wiggled around, run back to safety, use your Hole Cracker to again immobilize another leg, and then go back to planning the deadline. Don't try and place it a third time because it's that third time that will end up taking you down. Now with this Bastion eliminated, I ran towards the Hydrodome and used the zip line to get down a little bit quicker and to have a more direct path to the Hydrodome. As I was getting to this Bastion though, it sounded like there was a raider who already put some damage on it, so I stayed a little bit far back and just poked it with my Hole Cracker until it blew up. With this Bastion, it can be really dangerous to try and deadline it, especially when you have all the flying arc enemies aggroed and angry at a player in the area. All it takes is a single Hornet to stun you as you go to deadline the Bastion, and then it's end of round for you and a big crawl back to the extraction if you're using the Survivor Augment. Additionally, with other raiders participating in the Bastion elimination, you can't be sure whether or not they're going to use an explosive, and all it takes is one rogue explosive to end your run instantly from that raider. So my recommendation, if you're seeing another player that's already targeting a Bastion or a Bombardier, just use the Hole Cracker as supplemental damage and accept that you might not get that many trials points for the elimination, but you'll live to fight another day and can go stack up more score later in the round. Now at this point, the goal was to rotate back over to water treatment and look for a leaper and take that out, and then rotate back towards the testing annex and take out the leaper as well. But the Bombardier ended up spawning as I got to water treatment, and I didn't happen to see a leaper in that area. So I turned around and focused on that Bombardier and took it down with the same strategy I used on the first one. Now in general, for the rest of the match, this is essentially what I did. I just rotated between the spawns and I listened for when they would spawn in. You can generally hear when a Bastion spawns in or when a Bombardier spawns in because they make a lot louder of a noise when they land. And they also make a unique sound once they spawn in, letting you know that they're there. The Leapers are really just secondary and should fill your time when you don't have the other bigger arc on the field. And you don't want to try and run too far down into the testing annex area to get the next Leaper because you're just wasting time on the run back. But if you can, find the Leaper and aggro it to you because obviously the Leaper can jump and close the gap really quick. So just use your weapon to poke it and pull it towards you. Continue to rotate through all of these big arc spawns. And if you run out of your explosives, you can just rely on the Hole Cracker to do the heavy lifting. It will definitely take more time and put you a little bit more at risk, but overall it's an effective strategy for taking out the big arc if you don't have a deadline or wolf pack to do it. Beyond that, make sure you're paying attention to where the final extraction is and don't let yourself get caught out on the run over there by not giving yourself enough time. That said, if you do happen to still have a deadline on you and a Bastion spawns with a few minutes left and you're close to the extraction, feel free to take the time to clean that up because it is a ton of points for you to stack up just before you extract back to Speranza. Once you scored enough points and you're happy with your eliminations, head back to Speranza, collect any loot if you haven't already, and watch your score fly up the leaderboard. That's going to be it for me today, y'all. Thanks for watching.